Hello everyone. In this lesson, we're going to work on permanently storing the information that the user submits to us when they fill out our registration form. Right? Because currently, we're showing them a fake thank you message if they don't have any validation errors. But in reality, we don't just want to show them a fake thank you message. We want to permanently store that data forever. Now, in the tech world, when we want to save data like that permanently, we use a tool called a database. Now, there are so many different database systems or flavors of databases out there. So perhaps the most famous would be MySQL or MySQL. There's Postgres. Another really popular one is MongoDB. But if you're just getting started, I recommend learning a SQL-based database system. So we could go with MySQL or Postgres. However, the simplest approach by far, now I'm not saying the best approach, but I'm saying the simplest approach, is something called SQLite. Now, at this point, do not worry what SQL even stands for. Just know that we need some sort of database system. And I'm letting you know that SQLite is about as simple as you can possibly get when it comes to databases. So if you were working for a huge company or a startup that where you expect to get lots and lots and lots of traffic and tons of user signups, maybe SQLite would not make the most sense, and you should use something like Postgres or MySQL. However, outside of scalability, a lot of the basic concepts and syntax are the same between MySQL and SQLite, whereas SQLite is just so easy to get up and running quickly and easily. There's really no intimidation factor, and so at this point in your journey, I think it makes the most sense. I think we're going to get the most traction very quickly, and you're going to be surprised how easy it is to get started. So let's work through this course using SQLite as our database, and then at the end of the course, if you want to try to build a different application using a different database system, feel free. But let's do this. Let's go back into VS Code, and let's write out a prompt together. So I would say, in register.php, if there are no validation errors, in addition to showing the user a thank you message, please store their submitted username, email, and password in a database. For our database, let's have a file named, and I'm just making this up, but let's have it be named app dot, and then this is not made up, .sqlite. And have that file live one folder up out of our project so that it is not in the public web root. We'll see what this means in just, under a minute. Please use PHP's built-in SQLite functionality, and be sure to keep security in mind and use prepared statements. Don't worry, a bit later in the course we can learn what a prepared statement is. In register.php, have code that checks to see if a user's table exists, and if it doesn't exist yet, create it with appropriate username, email, and password columns. All right, let's go ahead and press enter and see what that gives us. Okay, so we've ran into our first AI error. You can see my file name, register.php, is red. This means that the AI agent has an error in the syntax in our code somewhere. So before I even try to run this in the browser, I'm just going to tell the agent right away, there is an error in the register.php file. Please find and fix the syntax error. Go ahead and press enter and let it fix that. Okay, looks like it found the error. It's no longer red up in the file name area. Let's test this out in the browser, and then we can look at where that database lives on our hard drive. So go ahead and fill in valid or correct values for all of the forms on register.php. So I'll click sign up. We see thank you for signing up, but more importantly, let's go look at a folder on our computer together. So in the local app, click on site folder, dig into app, but now you don't need to dig into public. Here we see app.sqlite. Here's what's cool about this. This is our database, but malicious users can never access this because once we push our website live, only the files in public will be deployed to a server. So like when someone visits, ourdomain.com, yes, they can see these files or, access the endpoints that these files expose. But because this file doesn't live in public, it's outside of the web root, which means the public can't see it. Now, this is not how more advanced database systems like MySQL or Postgres work, but for SQLite, it is a file system-based database, and this approach is surprisingly secure. As long as it's not in the public folder, we're good to go. Now, how in the world can we open this file to look at it or view it? Because I want us to go look to make sure that the user that we just signed up with actually was stored in the database. Well, there is an amazing program. Here's the official website for it. It's SQLitebrowser.org, and it's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. So pause this video right now and get this program downloaded and installed. This program is going to let us open up that database file and very clearly see what's inside of it. So once you resume this video, I will assume you've downloaded and installed DB Browser for SQLite. Okay, the program should look something like this, and now all you need to do, you can use the file open feature, but I like to just drag the file, this file that we were just pointing at, so not in the public folder, but just app.sqlite, just drag that on top of your DB browser program. Perfect. Now, right away, you might not see any data, but we can see there's the structure. So there's tables. There's a table called users. Beautiful. But more importantly, I like to click on this tab right here that says Browse Data. And now on that tab, we can choose which table we want to look at from this drop-down menu. Let's choose users. Absolutely beautiful. Well, I see good news and bad news. The good news is that this first row stored my Brad user. The bad news is that it stored my password in plain text. So if for some reason the worst case scenario happened and our database was ever leaked, we would have just exposed the real plain text password of every single one of our users, which is an absolute worst nightmare for security. So before we move any further, let's go ahead and delete this row. And I want to show you, you always want to have your code hash the user's password value. So to delete a row, just right click on this area, not the ID column, but to the left of that where you see number 1, right click on that and choose delete record. And then we're not done. You need to click on this write changes button towards the top menu bar. So click write changes. Now we're done. Cool. So we deleted that row or that user. Now let's go back into VS Code and let's tell the agent, this looks great, but please be sure to hash the user's password before storing it in the database. Let's go ahead and press enter. Cool, looks like it's already done. Let's test that out. So back on my home page, if I click on sign up, fill out the form correctly once again. I'll click sign up. Beautiful. Now if I go back into the DB browser for SQLite, you do need to manually refresh. It's not just going to show you new data. So there's this little icon right about here. When I'm viewing the users table, if I click that icon, it refreshes. And now this is what we want to see. It did not store my password in plain text. It hashed my password. So now even if the worst case scenario happened and somehow our database got leaked, we're not revealing our user's actual password value. However, in our next lesson, when we let registered users log in, we can compare their attempted password value with this hashed value, and the algorithm can detect if it's a match, and we can let them log in. Perfect. Now, before we bring this lesson to a close, let's add a few details to our logic. Let's make sure that a new user can't come along and sign up for a Brad username or use the same email address. So we need to make sure that these values don't already exist in the database. If they do, let's show the user an error message that says, that username is unavailable or that email address is unavailable. So let's go back into VS Code. Let's tell the agent, in register.php, please make sure that a username that the user entered doesn't already exist in the database. If it does, show the user a message that says that username is not available. Please also make sure that the email address doesn't already exist in the database. Finally, and then I'm just going to add a bit of validation because I forgot this in the previous video. Let's make sure that the email address can't exceed 100 characters and also make sure the password can't exceed 100 characters. So finally, please make sure that the email address cannot exceed 100 characters, and also make sure the password cannot exceed 100 characters. Let's press enter and test all of this out. Okay, it looks like it finished. And just to let you know, we haven't mentioned it until this point in the course, but at the end of this video, let's make sure to keep these changes. This is something that we have been skipping throughout the last couple of lessons. But essentially what I do is anytime I ask the agent to write code, I see if there's any errors, if this turned red. After that, I go actually test it in the browser. And then if everything is working correctly, you're supposed to accept the changes. This way, each time you tell the agent to do something for you, it can track the difference and it can highlight the parts that it added in green, or the parts that it removed in red, so on and so forth. So let's go make sure that this works. So back on my register.php page, this should fail because this username is already taken. So if I click sign up, perfect. That username is not available. That email address is already registered. Beautiful. And now what if I try to sign up with a password that exceeds 100 characters in length? So I made sure the username and email are unique, but I made the password way over 100 characters long. I click sign up. We see password cannot exceed 100 characters. Beautiful. I'm going to assume, if this was the real world, you would want to make sure that the email address is also limiting it so that someone can't enter a 9,000 character long email address. But I'm going to assume that that logic is in place. So back in VS Code, I'm going to accept these changes. So you can click this check mark, or on this bottom area, you can just click keep. Keep again, because in the previous lesson, I didn't keep the changes in index.php. And you want to do that after every task that the agent runs, because it's easier that way to keep track of what actually changed. When things start getting more complex, we are going to want to actually review that. You should always be reviewing the code that the AI is giving you. And we will definitely do that throughout this course. But in these first few videos, it's hard because there are so many concepts we're touching on. And I feel like going through the code would just overwhelm you right now because we're already using enough new vocabulary in our prompts. But to recap, in this video, we set up our database, we learned how to store data in it, and we learned how to open that up with this program and actually see the data that's being permanently stored. In our next lesson, now let's let a user come to the site and log in with one of these existing user accounts and passwords. Let's keep our momentum rolling, and I'll see you then. Hello, everyone. In our previous lesson, we set up the sign up or register feature. So a user can click sign up, and we are successfully saving their data into our database. Well, now if we go back to our homepage, in this lesson, let's add a login link so that users can log into their account. And more importantly than that, let's learn how to remember them so that even if they sat here and clicked the refresh button a million times, our server remembers which user they are and keeps them logged in and has a little message that says like, welcome Brad, or welcome Meows a lot. Okay, so the first step is to create that new login page, and then we can have a link to it right about here. So in VS Code, I would just write a prompt of in index.php, below the sign up link, have a link to log in. Have it link to a new login.php file that you create for me. And in that file, have a form where users must enter a username and password. Check to see if the username and password they enter are a match in our database, specifically in our users table. You can find an example of how to connect to our database in our register.php file. You probably don't even need to include this line. In my experience, AI agents are getting better and better, it seems like each month that goes by, at being aware of a larger and larger context. I believe at this point they're aware of your entire project, so we likely could have gotten away without writing this. But it never hurts to be very specific. If the user is indeed a match in the database with their correct password, you will need to compare their value with the hashed value in the database. Then don't actually log them in yet, just send them a message that says congrats. Okay, so we're breaking this into steps. We're not going to actually log them in. I'll explain what that means to actually log them in just a moment. But let's break this down into multiple steps. Let's run this prompt. Let's analyze a little bit of what's going on, and then we'll talk about our next step. So let's go ahead and press enter. Okay, it looks like it finished. Let's go test it out, and then after we can look at the code of the new file that it generated. So if I refresh my home page, cool, there's a new login link. Let me click on that. Beautiful. Now let me fail the login attempt on purpose. So I do not have a username Meowsalot in my database. Let me try to log in. Perfect. Invalid username or password. Now let me try to log in with a correct username, but the incorrect password. Perfect. Now let me try to actually successfully log in. Now again, you do not need to type in your hashed value. There's no way you would know what your hashed password value in the database is. Just type in the real value, like mine is Corty. Click login. Awesome, you should see congrats, or well, your message is going to be slightly different than mine, but your AI agent will have wrote some sort of thank you or congratulations message here. So there's good news and bad news. The good news is that it's actively checking our database. It's comparing your username and password to see if it's valid. That is working. But the bad news is that the browser and the server, they don't remember each other. So if we go back to our home page and click refresh, it doesn't remember us. So in other words, let me log in successfully again. In other words, instead of just outputting this little bit of text that says congrats, we need to learn how to let the server remember a visitor. Because by default, the web is entirely stateless. Each time your browser sends a request to the server, there is no carryover from the previous request. Each request is treated like a stranger, like a clean slate, a clean canvas. The client and server don't have memory of each other. However, we can add sort of a consistent memory to the equation by using sessions and cookies. So do this with me. Let's write a new prompt. Well, first of all, you can go ahead and keep those changes, or at least in my case, the changes are looking great. Everything's working, so I'll keep that change. The link to log in our homepage looks good. I'll keep that as well. Perfect. Now let's write a new prompt. I'm going to say in login.php, if the username and password are indeed a match, instead of showing the user a congrats message, let's actually log them in. Which means give them a cookie and start a session. So a cookie is something that the web browser, the client side, the user's device will store. And a session is a bit of memory on the server side, the PHP server side. If this doesn't make sense at all, that's okay. I will show you how to look at it in your Chrome or browser dev tools, and I promise in the next few minutes it will make sense. Let's say when you give the user a cookie, make sure that it is HTTP only and that its same site policy is set to strict. This is just a bit of security precautions I'm taking to make sure that our site is less vulnerable to cross-site scripting and to CSRF attacks. With this session in place, please update our index.php page so that only if a user is logged in, they see a headline that says, "Welcome, Brad," only the name should not be hard-coded. It should be their actual username. Feel free to store their username in session data. On index.php, if a user is not logged in, have a headline that says, "Welcome, guest." Okay, let's go ahead and press enter and see what that gives us. Okay, mine is done. Let's go test it out. So if I go to the home page and refresh, I see welcome guest. However, let's go log in. So click login, successfully log in. Actually, let me type an incorrect password in on purpose. Okay, perfect. I'm not logged in. I can go back to the home page and prove that. It still says welcome guest, but now let me truly successfully log in. So So I'm submitting my correct username and password. It says you are now logged in as Brad, and if I go back to the home page in my address bar, welcome Brad. Let's do two things. Number one, I want to show you what a cookie looks like in your browser and how that communicates with the server. And then number two, let's make it so that when you log in, it automatically redirects you back to the home page instead of just sitting on the login page. So to see your cookie in action, and this is actually a great way that we can log out without having that feature built into the app yet, just right-click anywhere on the empty part of your page and click Inspect. That opens up your dev tools. And now I want you to look for the tab that's called Application. Once you click on Application, in the left-hand sidebar, you're looking for this storage area. And under storage, you'll see cookies. You might need to click this arrow to expand the cookies area. But under that, you'll see different addresses. And you should see the local address. So for my example, it's ourapp.local. And when I click on that, it's going to show me any and all cookies that I have for this domain. Now, I can refresh 1 billion times and I stay logged in. It remembers me because what is a cookie? A cookie is just a little bit of data that your browser automatically sends along to the server on each and every request. So when I click refresh, my browser is sending a request to the server for this homepage URL, right? And if I click refresh 3 more times, each time that just sent 3 more requests. Each time my browser sends a request to the server, in addition to that request, it's also saying, hey, server, I'm giving you our session ID, and here is its value. This value lets the server identify us as, potentially 1 out of 1 billion different users. This value proves that we are the person that just successfully logged in with a real username and password just a moment ago. This identifies us. Otherwise, without this, HTTP requests are stateless. So if you delete this, like if you click on this row and click delete on your keyboard, click on this row and click delete, now when I refresh, I'm logged out. The server has no idea who I am. Cool, so let's go adjust our code so that when you successfully log in, it redirects you back to the home page, right? Instead of that awkward screen that says, congrats, you're logged in. So I would just tell the agent, perfect. Now adjust login.php so that when a user enters a valid username and password, you redirect them back to the home page, or just say quotes / like the root URL of our domain. But if they enter an invalid username and password, keep the existing behavior of keeping them on that page and showing them the error messages. Let's go ahead and press enter and see what that gives us. Okay, it looks like it finished. Let's go refresh. So I'll try to log in with my correct username and password. Awesome, it automatically redirects me back to the home page. There's my name. I can refresh 1 million times. Back in my dev tools, I have a new session, a new cookie. Perfect. Now, obviously, we're going to work on common sense. Like once you're logged in, you should no longer see sign up and log in. That's simple. We're just a prompt away from fixing that. Before we worry about that, let's complete a few more details. Let's have a link that says log out because you can't expect users to go into their dev tools and delete cookies to log out. They need just a simple button that logs them out. And then after that, let's set it up so that when you sign up for a new account, it automatically logs you in and takes you back to the home page. So let's go do all of that. Let's have a new prompt. Let's say, perfect. In index.php, please add a log out link and have it linked to a new logout.php file that you create, which destroys the session and cookie and redirects the user back to the home page, quotes /route. Also, in register.php, if a user enters valid information and you add a row for them in the database, go ahead and log them in using the same cookie and session strategy that we used in login.php. let's say, and also redirect them back to the home page. All right, let's go ahead and press enter and see what that gives us. Okay, looks like it's done. Let's go test this out. So I refresh. I'm currently logged in as the Brad user, but let me click on log out. Perfect. Now let me go try to sign up. I'll sign up as Meows a Lot. I'll enter all valid data, click sign up. It automatically redirects me. You can see I'm logged in even if I refresh a billion times. Perfect. Back in VS Code, I would go ahead and accept all of those changes. Things are looking good to me. Perfect. Now in future lessons, you and I can clean things up, right? It doesn't make sense to show sign up and log in to a logged in user, but let's not even worry about that for now. That's just common sense. What we're worried about right now is filling in the gaps in our knowledge. What I mean by that is now that we have a logged in user, how in the world do we start to let them create a critter? Right? Only logged in users should be able to select, an adjective, a noun, a verb, and a location. So long before we worry about sending off a request to an AI image generator, before we get to that, we need to first just learn how, from a database perspective, do we want to store all of those nouns and adjectives and verbs and locations? How do we want to let the user choose them and interact with those options? So on and so forth. So up next, let's get that skeleton working. In our next lesson, we'll create a create critter page, and we'll think about a plan of how to store all of those values in our database in the most efficient and common sense way. Because remember, we want to let the user sort by those entries. Like we want to be able to show the user all of their orange critters or all of the turtles or any critter that's at the beach. We want our data to be easy to sort and fast to perform. So let's keep our momentum rolling and let's start working on our critter creation in our next lesson. Hello everyone. First of all, this video lesson is optional, so feel free to skip it. Having said that, this video lesson is about Git. I often refer to Git as the universal skill because regardless of which tech stack or specialty you choose in the world of programming and development, regardless of what you choose, every single developer needs to learn Git at some point. However, you don't need to learn it right now, right this minute, and I don't want this course to depend on Git. So maybe if you watch this course through a second time, you could try to use Git the second time around, or if you're coming into this course with a bit more experience and things are feeling really easy for you, sure, you can go ahead and try to use Git right now. But for anyone else, please remember this video is optional, so completely feel free to skip it. Having said that, if you're here and you want to give Git a try, in this video I'm going to show you why Git is so useful and how to get started using it yourself. So Git is a version control system, which is a fancy way of saying it helps us keep track of changes we make to our files over time. Why is that useful? Well, let me show you a real example. So here I have the world's simplest web page. It just says, hello, this is my great web page. Now imagine I was really happy with this, and then imagine I tried to add a new feature to it, but I messed things up beyond recognition. Like maybe I tried to add a bit more text here, but it was gibberish and it didn't make sense. And maybe I accidentally changed the text to be orange. And then you say, hey, this looks horrible. This is so bad. But imagine it wasn't just as simple as those few lines of code. Imagine I made like hundreds of lines of code worth of changes, and it's a nightmare, and I just want to go back to the previous locked-in version of my code. Well, because I'm using Git, it's as simple as just in the command line, I can just say git reset -- hard head, hit enter, and just like that, my code is exactly back to its last locked-in status. So crisis averted. So that's feature number one I want you to be aware of. It keeps track of your history, which lets you reset and go back if you need to, or reference it. Another great reason to use Git is it lets you build complex features in sort of a separate area and then merge them back into your main project when they're actually ready. Let me explain. Have you ever wondered how in the world teams of coders add in big new features to their app while still maybe updating the app itself in the meantime? Let me give you an example. Imagine we needed to add a new feature to this page, but it was going to take like a week to create that new feature. And during that week, maybe other developers on the team were going to make ongoing changes to this file, like For example, maybe every day they needed to update this headline. So how in the world can you manage like multiple developers or just the act of like working on multiple features in a project at the same time like that? Well, check this out. In Git, I can spin off a new feature branch. So I'll say git checkout -b for a new branch, and I'll name it what? Amazing feature. The name doesn't matter. You could name it anything. And don't worry about following along. You don't even have Git on your computer perhaps at this point. But the idea is that I just created a new branch named Amazing Feature. And now in this copy or this branch of the files, I can add my new feature. So I could say like, this is the new feature. It is super complex, right? And I can save my changes and I can work on it for a week. And now check this out. Let me commit those changes. You do not need to memorize this, but I'll just add all my changes. I'll commit and I'll say, working on new feature. Now, here's the cool part. I've locked in the changes on this new feature. Now, imagine if I want to go back to the main copy of the site that doesn't have this new feature yet. You just git checkout main, and look at that. And it immediately goes back to the real live good copy. That experimental code that still needs a week to be worked on isn't here. But now use your imagination that a week has passed and whoever was working on that really advanced feature says, hey, it's done. It's time to merge it back in to the live website. Well, even if in the main website you see it's not here yet, I could change this. I could say like, hello, today is today. And then let me lock that in on the main copy of the site. I'll just say, today's changes. And now imagine I'm actually ready to pull in that new feature that was right about here. I can just say git merge. I'll say no fast forward, but the branch name was Amazing Feature. Give it a quick merge message. And it's that easy. There it is now. But notice everything got mixed together perfectly. Like it kept my new today is today, but it was smart enough to know that like that extra code goes down on this line. So long story short, you don't even need to use feature branches at this point. I will let you know that in the professional developer world, feature branches are used every day, all day. But for this course, even if you don't use feature branches and you just use that ability to reset back to a current good state. So like once again, imagine if I accidentally deleted my style sheet and I, made weird changes to index.html. All I need to do to fix this is just run this command of git reset -- hard head. And you can see it brings back my style sheet and it fixes all that. So that in a nutshell is my 5-minute explanation of why Git is so useful. Now let me show you how you can start using it if you want to. The official Git website, well, I'm not sure if it's considered official or not, but this main Git website, git-scm.com. On Windows, you could just go down here and click download for Windows. On Mac, you could download this, but I know that on Mac, if you just go into your terminal and type a git -- version, just running that, if you don't already have Git, will offer you like a little Mac system pop-up that says, do you want to install developer tools? And you can just click yes to that, and that will install Git. So that's for Mac users, but whether you're a Mac or a Windows user, this website has you covered. You can download Git. Now, let's assume that you've installed Git. You might need to completely restart, like quit and relaunch VS Code. But then down in your command line, which is Command or Control J to toggle it in VS Code, you will need to run a few commands for the first time. This first one is git config -- global user.name and then in quotes your name. And then the second command you'll need to run, here it is, git config -- global user.email and then in quotes your email. At this point, let me close this VS Code window for this super simple website. And instead, I want to talk about how you could use Git in this course for our actual, project folder. So in local WP, you can click Site Folder, and then you go into App, and then Public. Public is the folder that you want to have open in VS Code. Now, excuse my left-hand sidebar. I'm filming this video towards the end of the course, so I have a lot more files over in the sidebar than you will at this point in the course. But I'm just showing you the public folder. This is the folder that you would want to turn into a Git project. So with Git installed on your system, and you ran those name and email commands, you're ready to go. So you would just open up your command line with Command or Control J, and to turn this folder into a Git project, all you do is say git and then a space and then init. Just run that. That's it. This is now a Git project. Now, let me show you how to get up and running. And this is not a video lesson where you're going to legitimately learn or truly remember or memorize Git, but I at least want to get you started. And then from here, if you want to watch a YouTube tutorial or, chat with AI about how to use Git on your own time, you can. But you would just perform a first commit. To do that, you can just say git add and then a space dash uppercase A. That'll add everything to get ready to commit. Then to actually commit it, you say git commit, give it dash lowercase m for a message and say first commit. I mean, this could be anything. You could say unicorn pizza, but close out the quote, press enter. You have now locked in those changes on your personal computer. So now I could even just start deleting different files in here, right? And I could mess everything up beyond recognition. I'm messing up files. I'm deleting stuff, just making a mess of things. But now, if I just run that command of git reset dash dash hard head, one command, and I'm right back to exactly how my files were from that last lock-in or commit. Now, if everything was really confusing in this lesson, that's okay. I don't expect you to learn Git in 5 to 6 to 8 minutes. I'm just letting you know, maybe the second time you work through this course, go ahead and give Git a try. In my honest opinion, at this point in your journey, I don't think you're quite ready for Git. It's going to add this extra point of friction and difficulty and frustration, but I'm just letting you know on your developer journey, sooner or later, you're going to need Git. So maybe when you get to the end of this course and you've built the Critter Loop application, if you want to circle back around and then give Git a try, I think this lesson will be helpful, or at least I hope it is. Let's keep our momentum rolling, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Hello everyone. In this lesson, we're going to begin the process of letting a user create a critter. So if you're not already logged into the app, go ahead and get logged in. So I'm logging in as my Brad user. Okay, and from this home screen where you're logged in, let's add a link that says create a new critter. So back in our VS Code, let's write a prompt. In index.php, only if you're logged in, show a link to, let's say, show a link of create new critter and have it link to a new file that you create for me called create-critter.php. Period. For now, let that new page just have a headline that says create your new critter. Let's go ahead and press enter and give that a run. Okay, so it looks like it finished. If I refresh my home page, here I see create new critter, and if I click on it, perfect. Right away, before we forget, let's be sure to tell the agent that if you try to visit this URL when you're not logged in, it should just automatically kick you back to the home page. So I'll accept those changes, but let's say in create-critter.php, if you're not logged in, it should immediately redirect you back to the home page. Now before I press enter, let me show you what we don't want to happen. So here's Google Chrome where I'm logged in, but here is Firefox where I'm not logged in. And if I just manually go up into the address bar and try to visit create-critter.php, you can see I should not be able to access this. However, if we go ahead and push enter on this newest prompt to the agent, you can see it adds this bit of code at the top of the file. And now in Chrome, I can still visit that new page of create-critter.php, but if I reload in Firefox, perfect, it kicks me back to the home page. Cool, so only logged in users can use this page. Now, what do we want to actually live right about here? We want a form where users can choose an adjective, and then a noun, and then a verb, and then a location. So how in the world should we set this up? And specifically, I'm talking about our database. Currently, we just have one table called users, but I can let you know that we're going to have another table called critters. And if you use your imagination and imagine that we were looking at the critters table instead of the users table right now, it would have a column of ID with a unique identifier, but then instead of username, it would have a column called like adjective, and then it would have a column called noun, and a column called verb, and a column called location. So then we would just store a row for each critter in our application. However, our application might have 1 million critters or 10 million or 50 million critters. So it doesn't make sense, for example, like if there are 3 million dogs that use the noun of dog. We don't want to store the data of literally like DOG for dog, 5 million times in our database. That's a waste of space. Or like for the location, like on a baseball field. That is a lot of characters. So instead, when it comes to database design, we would just want to store like the ID number of a noun or the ID number of a location or verb or adjective. That way, even if 10 million critters use dog as their noun, maybe the ID for dog is the number 4. So then that's all it has to store is the number 4. And then that could point towards, you guessed it, a different table. So we'll have one table called users, one table called critters, but then we can have other tables called adjectives, or we could have a table called nouns or a table called verbs. So when it comes to database design, a lot of times it actually helps, in my opinion, to work backwards. In other words, before we create that new critters table, let's go create our adjectives table and our verbs table and our nouns table and our locations table. So to make that happen, let's write a new prompt. I'll say in index.php. Now you might be wondering, why am I writing code in index instead of create critter? It's because by the time the user visits this screen of create critter, I want to make sure that the adjectives table has already been created, right? And someone's going to visit the home page before they visit create new critter. But let's just go ahead and finish this prompt. So I'll say like in index.php, if our database does not already contain an adjectives table, please create one. Each row should have an ID and also call it value column, where it contains a word like blue or green, for example. Please also write a bit of PHP that automatically seeds a few rows in the adjectives table if the table doesn't exist yet. For example, seed it with rows that have values of, and then just say red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. Let's go ahead and press enter and see what that gives us. Okay, it's done. So to test that, you just refresh the page on your home page, right? Index.php, just click refresh. And now go into your DB browser for SQLite. To refresh your memory on how to see this screen, again, back in local, you would just click site folder right about here, dig into app, and then you don't need to dig into public. This file right here, you would just drag your app.sqlite file on top of that DB browser program. In that program, go ahead and click the refresh icon, so we're dealing with the newest data. And now if I click on this area, and again, I'm in the Browse tab, not the database structure, but the Browse tab. In this table browse area, instead of users, I can click on adjectives, and perfect, there we see red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, 6 different rows. Now, I realize you and I don't need to build the exact same app, so you can have a different collection of adjectives than I do. However, I think it might be fun if you and I are just immediately working with the same big collection of words. So, in the resources for this lesson, you should find some sort of text file available for download or just text on the screen, and if you open it up, this first block of text, these are the values that I have. Or I should say, these are the values that I'm going to use. So in addition to different colors, there's words like sleepy or soft, sparkly, fuzzy, glittery, glowing neon. So let's see where we can use these files. If you go into VS Code, and this will be the first time we actually dig into the code instead of just using an AI agent. Don't worry, we're not writing any code, but we're just going to sort of paste in a little bit of values. So if you go into index.php, and now if you press Command F or on Windows Control F, you can search for something and just search for the word red. Or just search for any of the values that you see in your database here, your sample starter values. So for me, I see this line of code. And your code will be different than mine. That's just due to the nature of how AI generates things seemingly randomly. But you should see like an opening square bracket and then quotes and then the word red and then a bunch of values. So what we're going to do is just replace those values with this collection. And again, you don't need to do this, but this way we're working with the same, fun selection of words here. So I would just copy this entire little block of code, not the entire text file, just the first block, which is the adjectives. So I would copy that into my clipboard. And then in VS Code, I would select from the start of the quote around the word red, and then on the right side, end with the quote around the word purple or whatever your final word is, and then just paste in your clipboard. Okay, now check this out. If I hit save, all I would need to do is delete this table, and then the next time I visit index.php, it should automatically recreate it and seed it with these values. So if I click on database structure here, instead of browse database structure, I can just right click on adjectives, the adjectives table, and choose delete table. Click yes, I'm sure, and then you're not done yet. And this can be frustrating if you forget this step. You do need to click write changes up here towards the top. And once you do that, now you're done in this program for now. So now if I go back and refresh the home page, and now I go look at my database. So I go to browse database, and for the table, I do need to click the refresh icon. Okay, now if I try to select a different table, I can see adjectives. Perfect. So now there we see all the different values. So now you and I are working with the same collection of fun adjective words. For the remainder of this lesson, let's go ahead and set up tables for nouns, verbs, and locations. Let's start with nouns. So I would just go back into VS Code. I would go ahead and keep those changes. And then let's write a new prompt. Let's say perfect. Now also in index.php, do the same thing, but for a nouns table. It will be basically identical to the adjectives table in terms of columns, except it should be seeded with words like dog and cat and bird and mouse and rat. Let's go ahead and press enter and see if that gives us what we're looking for. Okay, it looks like it's done. Now in index.php, before I even run this in my browser, if you just press Command or Control F and search for the word cat or dog or bird or any of those nouns that we just gave it as an example, well, you guessed it. Let's just replace these. Well, you guessed it. Let's replace this list from my copy and paste file that I provided. So you can see this second chunk. These are all the different nouns. We have beaver, bird, bunny rabbit, cat, chipmunk, cow. This way you and I have the same fun collection of words. So I would just copy that into my clipboard back in VS Code from the start of the quote from the first noun until the ending quote of the final noun. Just replace that and paste in your clipboard. So let's go ahead and save that. And now back in the browser, if I refresh the home page, we don't see any change, but after you refresh that, now we can go to our DB browser, and you do need to be sure to click the refresh icon there. But now we should see a table, called nouns. Perfect. You and I should have the same values. Really quick, let's do the same thing for verbs and locations. And at this point, you can go ahead and click keep, but at this point, I think we can trust the AI to do both of those at the same time. So let's say perfect. Now do the same thing, but for a verbs table and also a locations table. The example seed values for verbs should be jumping and flying and swimming. The example seed values for locations should be on a farm, you could say comma, in the backyard, comma, in a field. Let's go ahead and press enter. Okay, now in index.php, if you press Command or Control F and search for jumping or just any of your verbs, you should see that collection here. Let's replace that with the big copy and paste value. So this third chunk of code, just select that, copy it into your clipboard, back in VS Code, just replace the quotes around those items and all of the items, hit paste. And then let's see, what was the for location? If you press Command or Control F and search for what we said in a field or in the backyard. Cool. So again, just take now this fourth and final chunk of text, copy that into your clipboard for all the locations, and then just replace that. So we see on a farm, you get the idea. Just replace all of those with pasting in your clipboard. Let's hit save, refresh your home page, and then one last time back in DB browser, if we click the refresh icon and check the tables, we should now have, beautiful, we have verbs, Looks good to me. And we have locations. Absolutely perfect. It may not seem like much, but now we have the skeleton ready, and in our very next lesson, we can create the critters table. Now, the reason that is going to be so much more fun than these tables we set up in this lesson is because the general public is never going to be able to add content to any of these verbs or locations or nouns tables. However, this is all going to be fun when we connect the dots. If you click on Create New Critter, your end users are absolutely going to be able to create new rows in the critters table. So we'll learn how to associate a row in the critter table. Well, first of all, we're going to create that table, but you associate it with the user ID of the user who's doing it, and then you also associate it with the different noun IDs and adjective IDs and verb IDs that they choose. If the last lesson or two felt like we were getting lost in the details, I think this very next lesson, where we actually start creating critter rows in the database, is going to have everything come full circle and have a lot of different puzzle pieces come together. Let's keep our momentum rolling, and I'll see you then. Hello everyone. In this lesson, we're going to set up our Create New Critter page. We already have a page, and when you click on it, it's just an empty page. And in our previous lesson, we set up these tables in our database of, nouns and adjectives and locations and verbs. So now let's just connect the dots. On this page, let's have a form where users get to choose a noun, choose an adjective, so on and so forth. And when they submit that form, let's have it create a row in a new table. So we'll have a table called critters, the critters table, and it can have columns of, adjective, noun, verb, location. So let me show you what I have in mind here. Here's what I would say for the prompt. In createCritter.php, add a form where users can make a choice from select elements and have select fields for an adjective, a noun, a verb, and a location. Populate each of these select elements with the contents from our database tables, so respectively the adjectives table, the nouns table, the verbs table, and locations table. Use server-side validation to make sure that the ID number of a noun that they choose exists in the nouns table. If a user enters a valid value for all four values, and then I would say, parentheses like adjective, noun, verb, location, then save a new row into the critters table in the database. You'll need to write code so that if the critters table doesn't already exist, create it and give it columns of ID, noun underscore ID, adjective underscore ID, verb ID, and location ID. Make sure that all of these columns are set up as foreign keys and are indexed for great performance. All right, now I know that was a really long prompt. Remember, in the resources for this course, you can find these prompts. After I record a video, I make sure that these are available as copy-pastable text, but let's go ahead and run that and see what that gives us. It looks like mine finished. Before I accept the code, I like to test it in the browser. So if I refresh the Create Critter page, cool, this form looks like it makes sense. Let me go ahead and test it out. So I'll say like a blue chipmunk, let's say jumps rope, and for location I'll say, at the mall, and then I'll click Create Critter. We see your critter has been created. Now, here's the moment of truth. Let's go look in our database. So in DB Browser for SQLite, you will need to click this refresh icon. But when I do, okay, I see a table called critters. Let's look at it. Awesome. So each row will have an ID unique for that critter, but then we see noun, adjective, verb, and location. This is great. But I just realized we're missing a very crucial column. We need a column that says which user created this critter. What I mean is if you look in your users table, you might only have one user, but in my case, I created that secondary Meowsalot user. But each user has a unique ID, right? That's what this column is. So in our critters table, we want to keep track of which user created each critter. So here's what I would do. You could have included this in the first prompt, but it literally just completely slipped my mind. And actually, before we write the prompt, to keep this simple, I would actually delete the critters table. Don't worry, as you get more experienced as a developer, it's very easy to run what's called database migrations, where you can definitely you don't have to delete a table, you can retroactively add a new column to a table. You don't always need to just outright delete the table. In fact, in future lessons, we can learn how to do that. But to keep this lesson as simple as possible, because there's only one row in this, I would just delete the table. So I would click on database structure, and then here it is, the critters table. Just right click on it, click delete table, click yes, and then this is the crucial part. Don't forget to click write changes. Now, with that in place, here's what I would do. I would say perfect, but in the code that creates the critters table, if it doesn't exist, change it so that we also have a column called, and I would just call it like author_ID, or you could call it user ID. You could make up any name you want, but let's say that stores the ID number of the currently logged in session user. And then I would say, similarly, when you add a new row for the critter, be sure to use the user ID of the current user and make sure it is saved or stored in that appropriate column. All right, let's go ahead and press enter. Okay, let's give this a try. So now back in the browser, I would refresh the home page, or you know what I mean. Just go to create new critter. Be sure you're working with the newest copy, and let's fill it out again. So I'll say like a crochet elephant flies a kite at the top of a mountain. So I click create critter. Now the moment of truth, if I go into my app, my database app, be sure to click browse database, and we want to click the refresh icon. But if I look at the critters table, let's see, perfect. So now we have this column called author ID, and because I'm logged in as the Brad user, we see author ID of 2. If I was logged in as my Meowsalot user, you can see Meowsalot has an ID of 3, then you guessed it, this value would be a 3 here. So now we truly have this self-contained row that has everything we need to know about a critter for now. In the future, we'll add another column called like image name, or image file name, or image ID, once we're actually generating images for each critter. But for now, this is perfect. At this point, here's what I think we should do. Let's set it up so that when you successfully create a critter, we don't just take you back to this screen with this message. Instead, let's kick you back to the home page. Let's go back to the home page. And I think the home page should show you a list of any critters that you've created. So here's what I have in mind. Let's do this. Let's have a new prompt. Let's keep these changes. And here's what I would say for the new prompt. Perfect. When a user successfully creates a critter, redirect them back to the home page. I'll just say quotes / quotes route. And on the home page, only if a user is logged in, have an area called My Critters that shows all critters where the author ID for a critter matches the logged in session user ID. Perform the necessary lookups so that each critter on the home page is a sentence that says the blank 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 blank, where you fill in the blanks with the adjective, noun, verb, and location values from the database tables. Let's go ahead and press enter and see what that gives us. Okay, it looks like mine is finished, so let me refresh the home page. Right away, I like what I'm seeing. The home page says My Critters. The crochet elephant flies a kite at the top of a mountain. Let me try to create a new critter. So I'll say what? the fluffy kangaroo plays chess in the backyard. Let me click create. It kicks me back to the home page, and there we see that new item. Awesome. Now I'm logged in as my Brad user. Let me try logging out and logging in with my Meowsalot account. So log in, Meowsalot. Go ahead and enter your correct password. You're free to create as many secondary or alternate accounts as you want. So Meowsalot doesn't have any critters, so we don't see an area. It'd probably be nice if we had an area that said, you know, you don't have any critters, go create your first one, but we can do that later. For now, though, let's test this out. So I'll create a new critter. I'll say the glowing neon horse hula hoops in a big grassy field. Click create critter. Perfect. At this point, we are now in a great position to start actually generating the images based on this selection. Now, before we get to that, I know that's going to be a lot of fun. Before we get to that, let's have one quick lesson where we take care of some miscellaneous details. For example, let me log out really quick. I want to improve the security of our login or, authentication system. I also want to fix a quick bug that I noticed with the cookies. Your application, because AI is random, you might not have the same cookie bug as I'm having, but I want to show you how I noticed it and how I would fix it. In other words, we're just going to have a quick video where we fix a few miscellaneous details, and then I promise we're going to get into the fun part where we start generating AI images for our critters. Let's keep things rolling, and I'll see you then. Hello, everyone. In this lesson, I want to take care of a few miscellaneous details, and then in our very next lesson, we can start creating the images for critters using AI. So in this lesson, the first miscellaneous detail I want to take care of has to do with the Create New Critter page. So if you're logged in, you can visit Create New Critter. Now, due to the random nature of AI code generation, your exact code may not have this same vulnerability that mine has, but based on my prompt from the last lesson and what my agent gave me, there's actually a very large security flaw with my Create Critter form. Right now, I want to pretend that I'm a malicious user and show you what I'm referring to. So for example, if I right-click on the form field for adjective and click inspect, here's my developer tools. This is the client side. So this is running on the user's computer. So they are free to modify this in memory. So like they can click on that select arrow to drop it down, and these are the different options that they can choose from. But now a malicious user could right-click on select and click edit as HTML and then just add a new option to pick from. So you could literally just like copy one of these options into your clipboard, and then on a new line, paste it in, and then change its value to, like the number 99, and then give it a value of like magical, and then just click off of that bit of code somewhere else up here, and now the user can choose that. So for example, back on adjective, there it is, magical. And now let me choose valid values for these other fields, and then click Create Critter. So you see it went through, and to really make sure that it went through, if I go into DB browser for SQLite and hit the refresh icon right about here on the critters table, there we see a new critter, and you see the adjective ID is 99. That is not a valid number. So in other words, we just let a malicious user insert a value that makes no sense to our application. This is a huge problem. Now, if I tried that exact same thing, if I went back to Create New Critter, and if I tried to edit the noun select, it would not let me do that because my prompt spelled out to protect us using server-side validation on the noun field. Let me show you the prompt that I wrote in the previous lesson. So I did have to scroll 3 or 4 prompts up, but here we have it. I said, use server-side validation to make sure that the ID number of a noun that they choose exists in the nouns table. And I assumed that the AI agent would then do the same thing for the adjective and then verb and the location. But the agent took my prompt literally, and it only added that server-side validation for the noun check. So like if I tried to click, I'm not going to waste our time, but if I tried to click inspect and added a bogus value on the noun field, the server-side validation would indeed protect us, and it would not allow the user to create that row in the database. But we want that protection for all 4 of our fields. Now again, maybe your AI agent knew what you meant and knew what the prompt meant, but that's why it's good to always pretend you're a malicious user and test every inch of your application. So to fix this, all we would need to say is, new prompt, in create critter PHP, you are perfectly using server-side validation to make sure that the ID the user chooses for a noun exists in our nouns database. But please implement that same server-side check for the verb ID they choose needing to be in the verbs table. The location, helps if you spell the word the correctly, the location they choose in the locations table, and the adjective they choose in the adjectives table. Cool, let's go ahead and press enter and see what that gives us. It looks like mine finished. Now before I test it out, I would go into DB browser for SQLite, and that old row that I was able to insert as a malicious user, I would go ahead and delete that row. So if you just click on the far left edge of the row, you can click delete record, and then don't forget this important step. You do need to manually click write changes. Perfect. Now let's go test this out in the browser. So if you refresh create critter, let's try to select a bogus value for all 4 of them and see what happens. So here's how you can do that really quickly. Just click inspect on that first select. Right click on the select element and choose edit as HTML. Copy any one of the options into your clipboard, and then just on a new line with enter, just paste it in. And let's do this. Let's just change its value to 99 and then say, for the value like bogus value. And then I would just copy that option into your clipboard and then just go do that for the other 3 selects. Go back. Cool. Bogus value. Let me submit that form. Perfect. So you should see 4 validation messages. So now that protection on the server side exists. Now there's no way a malicious user can take advantage of this form. In other words, we have now ensured that only rows that have correct IDs for all 4 of these fields will be added into our database. Perfect. Now moving on to the next detail in this miscellaneous lesson that I want to fix. It has to do with cookies in the browser. So open up your dev tools. So if I right click anywhere on the page and click inspect, instead of elements, we're interested in the application tab. And then on the left hand storage side, if you click this arrow to expand cookies and then click on your domain. Now again, due to the random generation of AI code, you may not be having this issue that I'm having. Based on the exact prompt that I wrote and the exact version of the AI agent that I was using, I have 2 cookies when we really only need 1 cookie. Now here's the important part. This is the default PHP session ID, and this is sort of a custom cookie that my code created. But the important part is that this custom cookie, it has a check mark for HTTP only. Let me try to expand these columns so we can read them. Well, you'll have to take my word for it. This column is HTTP only, and this column is same site policy. And you can see that this one was set to strict and HTTP only, which is what I want. But we don't need 2 cookies. So we would just want to apply those properties to the default cookie. We only need 1 cookie. So let me just write a new prompt. I would say, currently, when a user logs in, either from register.php or login.php, you're giving them 2 cookies instead of 1. Adjust the code so that we only give them the 1 default, and then let's see, what was the name? All uppercase PHP ses ID. I would literally just double click that and paste it into my clipboard and say, give them the 1 default PHP ses ID cookie, but make sure that it uses HTTP only and same site strict. Before I go ahead and press enter, I would actually, in our browser, log out, just so we can test this really easily. So I'll log out really quick. Cool. Now let me run that prompt, see what it gives us. Looks like it finished. Let me go test it out. So back in the browser, before I log in, let me check my cookie situation. So I'll click inspect, application, cookies. Just delete any and all cookies that you have under your Our App local area. So we're starting with a clean slate, and now I can test it out. So if I log in, wow, I'm glad I caught this on camera. So this is a huge bug that the AI agent has introduced. Before we can test it, we need to let the agent know. So in login.php, I would say in login.php, There are now syntax errors. Can you please check this file for basic syntax errors? Let's go ahead and see if that can fix it. So we see there are no syntax errors in login.php. The file passes a basic PHP syntax check. I don't know what to say. This is the interesting part of using AI, right? When I look at this immediately, this is an actual error message or a warning, but this is not an error. This is just PHP code being sent as plain HTML. So if we go back to VS Code, it can be confusing with certain parts highlighted in green and red. Like it looks as if this PHP tag up at the top is still there, but if I accept all of the changes in this file, so let me just click keep on everything, and now go back into login.php, now it's abundantly clear what the problem is. Up at the very top of this file, we're not entering into PHP mode. So the fact that the agent said there was no syntax errors is very interesting to me. I wonder if now that we've kept those changes, let me just say, in login.php, it looks like you're not opening into PHP mode at the start of the file. Okay, so now let's give it a test. If I refresh and log in with my Brad user, and then we want to check our cookies, this is not looking good. So we have the one cookie, but it's not using HTTP only or same site strict. So what I would do is just give the AI agent one more chance. I would just log out and go back in. Let's write a new prompt. Let's say I just tested logging in, and the cookie it gives me is missing HTTP only set to true and same site policy set to strict. Please fix this. Let's see what that gives us. Looks like it's done. Let's test this out really quick. So I'll log in with my Brad user. Let me check my cookies. Perfect. We have one cookie. You can see the check mark for HTTP only and same site is set to strict. This is looking good. But off camera, I just tested the new user registration cookie feature, and it is not using those features. So I would just write a new prompt and say, perfect. Now use those same cookie settings for register.php when a new user successfully signs up. To test that out, I would just go back into sign up, enter valid values, click sign up, check my cookies. Perfect. Now it is indeed HTTP only and same site strict. For the next miscellaneous detail that I want to take care of in this lesson, let's focus on if I log out really quick, let's focus on the login security of our application. So imagine a malicious user came to this page, and imagine they knew the username of like a friend or family's account, but they didn't know the password. If they were a malicious user, they could just start entering what's called a brute force attack, which is where you just enter password attempt after password attempt, and you can spam the server with 1,000 requests per second or 10,000 requests per second. And if you don't implement any sort of security against that, you are very vulnerable to that type of attack. Now, currently, our server doesn't have any sort of mechanism in place to protect against that. I mean, you can see I can just attempt again and again and again and again. Now, here's the good news and bad news. The good news is that we've already implemented a 12-character minimum for the password value. That's a great password length, and it becomes very difficult to guess that. Now, in combination with 12 characters long, if we just slow down our server's ability to accept incoming requests, I mean, you can do a little bit of homework. Go ask ChatGPT and say, if my application has a 12-character minimum password and it takes 4 seconds for each login attempt, how long would it take a malicious user to brute force their way in? And you're probably going to get an answer that says, thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions or billions of years. Long story short, all we need to do to drastically improve the security is just add some sort of timeout so that you can't just send new attempts instantly. So I would just have a new prompt and say, in login.php, in order to stop brute force attacks, wait 4 seconds server side after an attempt and before responding. Let's go ahead and press enter, see what that gives us. So now let me try again with an invalid password. I click login. Perfect. You can see it's spinning. It's spinning. I can't send another request right away. Now again, we have good news and bad news. The good news is that this would stop a very basic or naive malicious user. The bad news is that it's not going to stop a talented malicious user, because a skilled malicious user is not going to sit in their browser and wait for each attempt. They're going to have a script that spawns 1,000 or 10,000 requests all at once and lets them run in parallel. So in that case, they don't care if it takes 4 seconds to finish. They're just going to queue up 100,000 requests, and when they finish, they will know if they got in or not. So why am I rambling about this? It's to let you know that building a secure authentication system is a career-length task. I mean, people devote their entire careers to building truly secure login authentication systems. So if your application is mission critical, honestly, if you're new to the field, your best bet is not to build your own login system. And you can open up your notes file. Remember how we're keeping track of different phrases that you can research later? Just add in, for example, like Google Auth integration. The idea is that instead of coding your own login system, you can let your users log in using their Google account. And that way, Google has poured in probably millions of hours building a very secure login system. Because to build something that's truly secure, after so many attempts, you'd have to lock out that username or lock out different IP addresses. But even IP addresses, it doesn't matter, because malicious users have tools to send requests from different IP addresses. So then you would need to lock the user account, and then you need to unlock that user account using their real email address, so on and so forth. I mean, there's just so many. The dance between security and attackers is almost infinite when it comes to logging in. So try not to go down that rabbit hole. In my opinion, our system that we've built here for like a non-banking application is good enough. But in the real world, if you're going to build something that's mission critical, I just recommend using Google Authentication. Here I'm logged in again, and for the final detail in this lesson, let's set it up so that when you're logged in, if you click on sign up or log in, it should just not allow that, right? It doesn't even make sense for a logged in user to be able to visit those actions or pages. So I'll just have it kick you back to the home page. I'll say, if you're logged in and you try to visit login.php or register.php, it should not allow you to do that and should instantly redirect you back to the homepage URL. Parentheses, just / Let's press enter. Let's test that out. So I'm logged in. I click sign up. Oh, wow, that's disappointing. So for some reason, the agent forgot the missing PHP tag. You could obviously write a prompt to have the agent fix that, but I can let you know just up at the very top of your file, this tag, which is $PHP, that needs to come first before your PHP code. And since I just manually fixed it and added it right there, we don't need it again on this line. So I could save that, refresh. Whoops, that was in register.php, not login. So you'd want to do the same thing in register.php. The opening PHP tag, we don't need it right there. You need it before this code. So $PHP. You could have obviously prompted the agent to fix that, but let's test this out. So now I'm logged in. If I try to click on sign up, wow, that is not working at all. Let's do a quick prompt. Let's say I'm still able to visit register.php even though I'm logged in. The way that you're checking to see if a user is logged in or not seems to be working on the home page, but is not working in register.php or login.php. Okay, let's give this a try. So if I visit register.php while I'm logged in, cool, it kicks me back to the home page. If I click login, it allows it. That is not what is going on. Oh, it's still working on login. Okay, it looks like it finished. Now if I try to visit login when I'm logged in, cool, it kicks me back to the home page. Beautiful. So now you can't even visit those pages, but now let's hide them visually. A logged in user doesn't even need to see those links down there. So now I would say in index.php, if a user is logged in, don't even show them the sign up or login links. If I refresh, perfect. But if I log out on the home page, absolutely perfect. I know that was a messy lesson. That's just the nature of AI at this present moment. But in our very next lesson, we're going to have some fun. We're going to start working on the creation of the critter images based on their descriptions. Let's keep things rolling, and I'll see you then.